Reuters dropped an exclusive report detailing that Tesla is working on revamping the Model 3 with Project Highland. I guess the main purpose of this refresh is to cut production costs and boost the appeal of Tesla's most affordable vehicle, the one I'm sitting in right now. And I know a lot of people that are taking delivery of Model 3s right now that are probably quick to say, oh no, I don't want Tesla to refresh the Model 3, I just got one and I want to feel like I have the newest model, the latest version. To which I say you have the wrong mindset, because Tesla is constantly changing and iterating on their vehicles. If you want to wait until Tesla does some big refresh, then you're going to be waiting forever, because there's always going to be some updates or some changes, though it is worth mentioning that some updates are definitely more noticeable than others, and the Reuters report is pointing to the concept of a fairly large refresh, where the report was claiming that they wanted to make some pretty noticeable design changes on the interior to reduce complexity, which I laughed when I read out loud, because complex or overly complicated are not words I think anyone uses to describe the Model 3 interior, and if it is, it's because there's a lack of buttons, lack of knobs. Like, it's part of my favorite part of the vehicle, actually, having so little buttons or dials and just having such a clean, minimalistic interior. I'm a fan of it, and I like the simplicity, but the concept of Tesla trying to push the boundaries even further and reduce things even more so in terms of manufacturing cost is a very hard thing to wrap my brain around, but lots of people have now been speculating on more and more changes Tesla could make, which I think we should all be constantly questioning ourselves, like, what is Tesla going to remove next? Because they love reducing parts and they love reducing processes. So I also wanted to highlight some concept art that was recently put out by Alwinart, who showcased a bunch of changes he wanted to see made with the Model 3, and I love his work, and he says he's working on an updated interior as well, so please check him out on Twitter with the link in the description below so that you can check out his concept artwork for the interior refresh. But a few of his changes that he made that I would love to see brought to the Model 3, some of which unfortunately can't because of legal requirements in the US. But for one, he got rid of the thing that I'm anticipating Tesla is planning on removing next from the Model 3 and Y, which is door handles. It originally started back with the Tesla Roadster just having a little trackpad above the door that you swipe up on to open it, and now of course Elon and Tesla has said they want to get rid of door handles on the Cybertruck. And I think for like simplicity in the stamping design, as well as the overall extra, rotating parts that you have to install to have the door handles, not to mention the overall slick and minimalistic look of the car, I think Tesla's next big move is to drop the door handles, which will probably annoy a lot of people. I'm not expecting all of these changes we're talking about today to be things that everybody's in favor of, but when I checked out Ford's electric Mach-E, that doesn't have door handles either. It just has little buttons on the side, which it appears that the Cybertruck beta model that we've all seen also has little door buttons that you push on to unlock the door, or we might even get to the point where the Bluetooth and the phone key recognition with the car is so good that the doors just automatically present themselves. That's what it sounds like Tesla wants to do with the Cybertruck. Not quite the all-expanding method that the Model X doors use, but at least unlatch the door so that you can grab it and open it. Sort of like how they launched the door unlatch feature in the mobile app recently, where you can just press a button and the door to the vehicle just unlatches and kind of pushes itself outward a little bit. I'm not exactly sure how much money they'll save on that, but if that's the intention of this redesign, I do think ditching the door handles would be a good first start. The other great change Alwinart made in his concept that I would love to see brought to the Model 3, but we just can't in the US, is the dropping of the side view mirrors. I think this would improve the efficiency, the aerodynamics, which would make the cost of ownership of the vehicle lower, and Tesla could just rely solely on the repeater cameras, which already pop up when you signal and use your blinker in the car. Trying to get those cameras to be always on, though, might be a bit of a challenge. That may result in more complexity if they have to do something like what the Aptera has done with their Gamma design, which is put like two basic displays behind the steering wheel, and those just show your side camera view at all times, because sometimes you want to use your side view mirror, but you're not technically using your blinker yet, and having to wait until the display shows the camera every single time might be a little bit confusing. So it creates some new problems, but I think they're worth pursuing for the sake of efficiency, and it also just makes the Model 3 look a lot more slick and a lot more slippery. But while we're on the subject of the interior, if they do go that route in the future, which, if they start building the Model 3s in Europe, they do allow for cameras to replace side view mirrors there, then maybe if you're going to have cameras that are always always on or an extra display, it might make more sense to switch to the yoke design, which I know is controversial. Not everybody likes the yoke, but everybody that I've seen who isn't like drifting or taking their vehicles to the track all the time, which is most Tesla buyers, then any YouTube channel that I've watched that has tried the Model S and X updated yoke has eventually come around to liking it. At first, they're a little bit taken away by it, and it's definitely a worse solution when you're in a tight parking lot navigating and having to make three-point turns, but three-point turns are not what most of driving is. And the vast majority of people who have tried the yoke have said that for highway driving, they prefer it and they find it more comfortable and easier to see the display behind the yoke, and they find the interior more enjoyable and more open, and that's where we spend most of our time driving, is not doing three-point turns, but doing a lot of hours through traffic or on the freeway. So I know not everybody's in favor of this, including my wife. She would disagree with me if she was in this video right now, but I would love to see them bring the Model S and X yoke to the Model 3 and drop the gear stocks, change the direction to just being purely on the display. I don't know for sure if this is actually cheaper, because it does add some complexity to the overall steering wheel design, because now your blinkers and your autopilot and your voice commands, all of that is being done with little capacitive buttons, which is definitely more complicated than the current Model 3 steering wheel. But Tesla has the numbers on this, so if they do make this change in the future, they're probably right. But if they no longer had to rely on gear stocks, which are moving parts and both have buttons that you have to push inward on them, and instead they could just design a steering yoke, or if a yoke is too controversial, they could easily just use a steering wheel like the one they have in the Tesla Semi that still accommodates for those buttons. And then I think you would simplify and make the interior just a tad more minimal by no longer having those gear stocks, which if every little part helps, then maybe that can make a difference. But the Reuters article did detail that they wanted to make improvements to the display, and they didn't go into a lot of detail on how they want to make the display better, but I do think it would be awesome if they could shrink down on the bezels a bit more and increase the refresh rate. That also tends to apply a more modern, more responsive feeling to overall software, and I think Tesla is already the leader in that department, but they would maintain their lead if they were like the first car to have 120 hertz on their display, which a lot of smartphones and tablets are already there, so Tesla would just be kind of keeping up with the standards. But they also mentioned wanting to have powertrain improvements with this redesign as well, which I would love to see what they mean by that. Like, does that mean acceleration improvements or energy efficiency improvements? Because in my view, redesigning the Model 3, you know, switching to a yoke, dropping the gear stocks, or getting rid of the door handles is probably just going to cause a lot more complexity in other aspects. It kind of moves away from one part, but has to kind of replace it with another. So I wonder if any of the design changes I'm talking about would actually reduce the cost or reduce the complexity all that much. But I don't disagree with the concept that the Model 3 is due for a redesign. You know, they've been manufacturing it since 2017, and there's been refreshes to the Model S and X in recent history. And of course, the Model Y just started delivering in like 2020, which means it's not really that old. So basically, the Model 3 has seen the least number of changes in the lineup in the past 5 years. But what I think would help with reducing the cost and the complexity of the vehicle as a whole, and I'm happy to see that the delivery wait times of the Model 3 are dropping. That increases the likelihood that Tesla would shut down the assembly line just for a little while to update it with better designs. What I think they should update the Model 3 with is not necessarily a bunch of interior or exterior tweaks, but more so single-piece castings. Tesla has been bragging for years about how much simpler and more easy it is to make the Model Y than the Model 3 because of the single-piece front and rear castings they're using on the Model Y. And they always showcase the Model 3 right next to it, saying, look how complicated the rear underbody is. Look at how many parts it takes to build the Model 3 and how complex it is. And they boast about how many fewer robots they need to build the Model Y than they do the Model 3. And everyone's kind of wondering the same thing. Okay, why don't you switch to single-piece castings on the Model 3? Why don't you reduce parts, reduce complexity with the Model 3 design so that you can build that for even cheaper than you can build a Model Y? It's an overall smaller vehicle with less materials required. You know, the doors are smaller, the seats aren't lifted up as much as they are on the Model Y. It doesn't have a rear hatch design because it just has a basic trunk. Why is the Model 3 so much more complicated to build than the Model Y? Well, it's because they've basically had non-stop demand for the Model 3, so financially it hasn't made sense for them to shut down the assembly line. But if they're actually able to catch up on orders and they reach the point where there's not much of a wait time on the Model 3, then I think installing gigapresses that build Model 3 rear underbodies and single-piece front castings could help reduce the cost of the Model 3 greatly, which I'm all in favor of. I love this vehicle, and I've enjoyed driving it for the past 3 months, and I want more people to be able to enjoy it. I'm not one of those selfish guys that wants to buy the car and then have the prices skyrocket so I feel like I got a good deal. No, I would be very excited and very happy if prices tanked. I don't care what I paid for mine, I'm happy with the car, but I'd be very happy to see Model 3s dip below $40,000 again and hopefully reach that targeted $35,000, which if they use more lithium iron phosphate batteries in their designs and find ways of making them more efficient, cameras or tweaking the chassis a little bit to make it more aerodynamic, and of course switching to single piece castings on the front or rear, or even using structural battery packs like Tesla has tried using with the Model Y in the past. I don't care if they're 4680 cells or not, I just think that updating the design to make it more efficient and more affordable would be a great thing for the product as a whole. Ultimately, I don't think the interior or exterior needs to change all that much, but the methods used of mass production of the Model 3 are what need a lot more attention than what they're getting right now, and that's what I'm hoping is accurate about the Reuters article. And they claim in their article that Giga Shanghai is going to be the first to implement these changes in the third quarter of next year, so we still got, you know, about half a year before we would start seeing any of these updates, but they said that Fremont would follow suit as well. And there's definitely been reports that employees and engineers from Giga Shanghai came over to Fremont to help find ways of optimizing assembly and increasing production output. If you increase the production capacity, then you can lower the prices. And because of how simple and streamlined the Model 3 design is, I genuinely believe that they could undercut pretty much anybody else in the EV space if they really wanted to. Right now, they've got so much demand, they don't really need to undercut anybody else on pricing, but if they need more demand in the future, which they're getting closer and closer to that point because Model 3 wait times are shrinking, which is good, then I would love to imagine a future where you can buy the Model 3 that I'm sitting in right now for like $35,000 or $32,000, and then just imagine how much wider the demographic of people willing to buy a Tesla would be. But would having a yoke or having no door handles definitely scare you guys away from buying Teslas in the future? If you're a diehard fan of the way the Model 3 currently is and you don't want them to change the door handles or the gear stocks or anything, well, don't worry, because this refreshed Model 3 we're talking about in 2023 would probably drop the price of the older Model 3. So if you want to buy, you know, a 350 mile range, long range Model 3 from 2022, you'll probably be able to find it for much cheaper because it's the old design. It doesn't have the updated look that maybe a lot of new Tesla buyers are looking for. So what changes, what updates would you guys like to see with the Model 3 next year? And of course, take all the rumors with a grain of salt. These are not confirmations. These are not official reports or anything. It's all just rumors, but considering how long the Model 3 has gone without any major refreshes other than, you know, Chrome delete and the center console redesign, plus the dropping of the ultrasonic sensors, that's been a very controversial one. All your thoughts and opinions, let me know down below. And thank you to everyone on Patreon for supporting this channel directly. Seriously, helps me out a ton, as does just watching these videos. So thanks again. Have an excellent rest of your day.